Testing, testing. Testing, testing.
With computer.
Yes.
Starting
Are you
now.
gonna? There we go. Thank
Yes,
you.
this event will be recorded for those who can't get here or for those who want to see it again. Welcome all of you to our conversation about Route 91 coming to Guilford and beyond. I'm Veranda Porsche, and I love to listen to Guilford along with the rest of the world. And we're going to have a relaxed talk with some people who are knowledgeable about this subject. And I'm going to read their little introductions, and maybe you can wave to our studio audience here. Okay, Jim, you want to give a little wave? Okay, this is Jim Henry, born, raised, educated in Guilford in the Algiers one-room schoolhouse, graduated from Brattleboro Union High School in 1962, and he says, my grandfather, Elroy N. Coffin, started a roadside stand in 1930, and my mother continued after she inherited the farm and expanded the business. And I'm sure that he'll have a lot more to say about it, but I don't want to steal his thunder. We have Harry Evans. Harry, you want to wave? Harry?
Right here.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So Harry and Nancy Evans live along the Weatherhead Hollow Road, and Harry was born during mud season. He didn't tell me to say this, but it's such a great story. Harry was born during mud season and had to stay with his mother 2 weeks in the hospital, and then they had to bring him home from the turn on the Hollow Road on the tractor because of the mud. We can all relate to that during this mud season. Harry is a proud fourth-generation farmer and lifelong resident of Guilford, husband, father, grandfather, etc. And he's also very active on the Planning Commission. Okay, we have Bob and Jackie Gaines. You want to give us a little wave, Bob and Jackie? Okay, Bob Gaines has been a farmer since he was old enough to work. Alongside his dad and grandfather, he started out milking cows and growing feed and helping with the sugaring operation at the farm. Jackie helps out where needed. She feels lucky to be surrounded by such a wonderful family and friends and to live in such a great place at the farm. The Gaines family first settled in Guilford in 1782. A legacy that both Bob and Jackie are proud to be part of. And I just also wanted to add that Jackie is an incredible innovator, and she's just the founder of the haunted hayride that traumatized a whole generation of children, right? And I mean, with delight. And so I think that's enough from me. So, okay, we're talking about Route 91 coming to Guilford, and what was it like before the highway? And I wonder, Jim, if you would like to sort of set the scene for us, and then each one of you can weigh in if you like. Okay, Jim, take it away.
Okay. It was basically, we quite often forget that Route 5 is actually US Route 5 and goes all the way from Montreal to New York City. But it was the only way to enter Vermont on the eastern side was US Route 5. And when you entered Vermont, there was open farm fields. Basically, the Gaines's farm that you went through in quite a lot, quite quickly, then moving on to other farms along the way. plus we did have several in the 1950s of motor courts, which just developed before 91. And one of them was down there in Slay Rock, was the Melgrams. And I only remember that because it was so exciting. They were Swedish and they had a sauna. And I'd never even heard of what a sauna was. And theirs was the original one where they heated the rocks and poured water. But anyway, they had a beautiful motor court. It was beginning to be popular. And then as you came up Route 5, you did see filling stations. You saw little farm stands. But basically, it was farmland that was open, and you went by two of the one-room schoolhouses in Guilford, Slay Rock, and the next one would be the one in Algiers. And most people, this was what I'm talking about is when I was about 12 years old, that it would be large. There was people would come from New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, up through especially the opening of Mount Snow, which happened in the 1950s. And that was a big attraction. And as we all know, there's not a lot of passing space. Once you enter Vermont, there's very little passing until you get into the Brattleboro area. And as a result, that quite often there was a lot of traffic coming up Route 5. We had the Vermont Transit, was our Greyhound at the time, which would actually stop and pick you up alongside the road and leave you off when you were coming back. But we also had all the trailer trucks, the box trucks, and a variety of cars. And it was not uncommon to see a convoy going by our place that would be 20 and 30 cars in a row because nobody got a chance to pass once you got into Vermont. And everybody says, doesn't it now isn't a lot more traffic? Well, actually, it was less traffic on Route 5 now than it was at that time because it was the only way to get through here. But it was before we were first approached in about 1956, and it was during the Eisenhower administration that he wanted a national defense highway built that connected all the country. And that was the very, very beginning. And
So Jim, let me just break in and ask whether, Harry, do you have particular memories of before Route 91 around here?
Well, I do have some memories. We lived about 2 miles from Algiers, and so we were kind of away from the actual 91 construction, which was on the other side of town from us. But I was just a teenager, and I guess I was in high school, and my grandfather was town clerk from 1928 to 1958, and my mother was a town clerk from 58 to 61. So, and my great grandfather before then was town clerk. My grandfather was town clerk, lived right next door to us down by the bridge. So quite often I was in and out of his house, or everybody was, all the kids around us. And so we kind of heard of what was going on, but it was, I think it was the concern around town that, uh, well, I didn't know what really was going to happen, but everything kind of settled down into place after a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so Jackie and Bob, you you were Jackie. You didn't live in that area till you got married, right?
Yeah, I did live just down the road, like less than a mile.
Oh,
I lived right on Route 5. I didn't go too far to find
oh,
you.
oh. So then you would both have memories. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your memories of the before time, before Route 91?
Me?
Either one.
Well, when they first came around here to put the road in, they came around and asked if we had any rock. And we happened to have that quarry up here by the old schoolhouse. And so we sold them the rock for 3 cents a yard. And they put it all on 91 on the base of the road. And they took about 40 acres of our land and
Uh-huh.
gave us $700 for it.
So was that a conflict in your family about whether your family wanted to sell the land to them, or was it eminent domain?
You didn't have much choice, I guess. It's federal highway, and they just, they wanted it.
There was we found a contract in 1956 that they were going to pay $700 and come through and do the construction of the highway. So yeah, it split off 240 something? Around 200 and,
Oh, for the mountain.
Yeah,
On the mountain, we had a lot up there. Well, we still have it. We have the timber rights. Well, we sold the land to the fishing game, and then we kept the timber rights. And so we have to go over to Vernon to get up there to get access to it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, 91, down here at the state line, they used to get on there and go to Algiers and get off. And it was first, because this was done before down in Mass and before Brattleboro and North. So this was done first.
That must have been a thrill, just going and getting on that highway. Somebody, I got a call from Hugh Whitney of Marlboro, who used to own the store in Marlboro, and he had a story about the building of Route 91. He said his uncle had a lunch place in Brattleboro, and during the building of Route 91, a guy came in and said, "I thought they were building one road. How come there are two roads out there?" And the concept of having a divided highway was so radical. And so Hugh called me up to say this, and I said, "Well, why don't you come to our meeting and you can just tell the story yourself?" And he said that his kids got him a computer and he didn't like it and he wasn't going to use it, but he was glad to tell me the story and I could pass it on. So let's go on then to the actual building of the highway. And so, Bob, you started to talk about selling rock to them. What was the impact of it like while they were doing it on life along where you were?
Well, right up by the schoolhouse, we got that quarry, and they put a crusher in there, blasted rock and went it through the crusher, then trucked it over to the highway and used it for a base. And I don't know, that was...
you weren't very old.
No, I was only around 8 or 10 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the trucks out over here working.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of pictures of the
had
big ukes, things like that.
Uh-huh.
And his grandmother kept a diary and wrote every little thing. And there was they used to make a lot of maple cakes and ship them. So I'm sure because the traffic went right in front of the house here, they would be stopping in, and they probably had a real booming, they didn't have to retail or worry about, finding a restaurant or whatever. Kind of like Harry over there on the other side. He's got that lot of traffic on his road, right, Harry?
We have, yes, we have quite a bit now,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of traffic that comes up from Massachusetts, and they work in Brattleboro, so we have almost like a throughway by our place now compared to what it used to be. But let's see, what my thinking was, well, the town did get some taxes from the equipment that was in Guilford at the time of April 1st when they assessed stuff there. So that was, now I guess they've done away with the equipment tax and so forth. The town did get a little revenue in the form of taxes.
So
I don't
Harry,
know how much.
are you saying that the equipment that was used to work on 91, that the people who were building it paid taxes to the town on the equipment, or they
Yes.
rented Guilford equipment, or what?
No, it was just a tax, the tax on the equipment, their own equipment.
Uh-huh. So
But that's
Jim,
all,
oh, go ahead, Harry.
but that's been all abolished now. There's no tax on equipment.
Mhm. So Jim, what was the impact of the building of Route 91 on, in your recollection? Did everybody come and stop at your family's business and, get their maple sugar candies there, or?
It was coming and going. It was especially when they were coming back from the ski areas. They would all stop just to take something back from Vermont. So
Right.
it was a big thing. But one thing that Bob Gaines probably ran into before 91 was that, of course, the farmers had to use Route 5 to go from field to field. And sometimes you would,
Oh, right.
all of a sudden, like Clarence Coombs would pull out with his manure spreader out of Franklin Road, not realizing that there was a convoy of 20 vehicles at the top of the hill that were just about ready to come down. And so here were all these people with 20 or so vehicles, and they would come up behind the manure spreader and the tractor going 20 miles an hour, and everybody had to go right along because there was no passing, so it was a different time. But but one thing that when Harry was talking, people don't realize that Guilford's roads were not paved. There was no paving once you left at Algiers. The only paving was the Route 5. There it was dirt road all the way up to Weathered Hollow, and then Weathered Hollow, because we ended up being sent to Weathered Hollow one-room schoolhouse for the 7th and 8th grade, and I remember it was trying to get through there in the springtime. It was really a muddy hole all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
When they have an accident over on the highway, we see so much traffic, and Bob has said, well, how would you like it if 91, wasn't that? That is exactly what it would be. And Jim hit it right. I said, I mean, when you pull out with a piece of equipment, even right here, the speed limit's 50. But when you're going down the road and you're holding up traffic, and there's people even that live around here that get really perturbed. They're looking at you when you're going by, and I'll wave, and they'll look at you like, why are you on the road with that thing? But yeah, it's good that it's there in some ways for sure. Although it would have been nicer. His grandfather spent a ton of time over on that mountain,
Yeah.
He was a real logging guy, and didn't they have sawn?
They used to cut chestnut for the railroad for ties.
Wow. Wow. So Bob, you're saying that they had chestnut on that land that they
Yeah.
sold for railroad ties?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it must have been such a problem to try to access it. Well, we have some questions from our audience. Oh, go ahead.
This was long before 91 was.
No, that's what, so after 91, did he still try to harvest wood from there?
No,
If you couldn't really get there. I
No,
mean,
well-
without going.
you have to go to Vernon and go back up on the mountain.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be so difficult. So we have a question from somebody in our audience here. Okay, and anybody can take this up. How did the construction of 91 affect the townspeople in terms of moving dirt, which created a lot of dust, as well as hours of operation? Did it keep folks awake? How many families had to relocate their homes, and who paid for that? So whatever you have heard of this, was there a lot of dust and noise and dirt?
Oh, it was a tremendous amount of noise because they had to cut right through the land. When you go down 5 now, when you realize that 91 is over on your left-hand side going south, and all of that was farmland. You could go from one side to the other. Across from us was just cornfields as far as you could see. And it was, when they came through, they had to scoop whole portions of the land. And I can remember the Crosmans particularly because the road went right through their farm. And the dust, and it was like a year of living in heavy, heavy dust, the enormous pieces of equipment that they would just be laid down this road at, a mile at a time. And it just was, they did take resources from anybody. If we had a small gravel pit and they came in and took everything because that was they built the highway out of the local resources.
And so was that a valuable source of money for your family?
No, because they didn't overpay for anything. So when they came in and said, okay, we're going to take, 5,000 yards or whatever, they would tell you that we'll pay 2 cents a yard, and you didn't have a choice. It was like when they bought the land. They said they were going to be reasonable, but reasonable depends on whether it's your farm that they're going through and you have to move. That didn't happen to us, but it happened to the Drurys down just below. They took the entire farm, and the family, all of a sudden, they had to move, and they had been there for hundreds of years or a lot of years.
Yeah. And did they reimburse them enough to be able to relocate?
Well, it's hard to say because, of course, this was like in 1950, and it was always on the lower side. It was never like nobody got rich selling their property to the federal government with the highway through.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Bob's father, sorry.
Okay, so Harry was trying to say something, and then we'll come to you, Jackie.
Sure.
Harry, what do you want to say?
One of the things that I thought was a great change there up on our end, up towards the Algiers there, where the Whipple place is, a big yellow house there. the field used to come right up level with the old Route 5. And now look at the interstate is now way down in a hole there. So it changed the landscape of that whole area there. That's where the new Welcome Center is too.
Mm-hmm.
And when they built it, they had a Welcome Center down just across the state line into Guilford.
And so, Jackie, what did you want to say?
I remember listening to his father, Bob Sr., and talking about when they were looking for the granite and different things that they could utilize for the highway, that they gave him a price. They said, this will be good for you. And they gave him, well, how much was it? 3 cents, sorry, 3 cents and
A yard.
a yard.
A yard, yes.
But then what they did, and this bothered my father-in-law, he said,
Yeah.
when it came time to write the check, they sat there and they did it. Well, he thought that it would be truckloads, and evidently my father-in-law was trying to count the truckloads, and he had a good estimation of how much they were taking. So he said I had a pretty good vision that I was going to get a decent chunk of money, but they did it. What was it? He called it in the quarry, contained rather than once they blow it up, crushed, right? So.
Oh, you
that
mean
bothered
that they
him.
paid for it crushed rather than the whole
The
piece?
opposite. No, the opposite. In other words,
Oh.
if you see a lot of land that's packed, we'll say, or a quarry that's all big, huge, they had
Right.
to blast it. They were drilling and blasting. So the noise level must have been, I wasn't here, and he was
Yeah,
young,
yeah.
but yeah, they were doing some dynamite stuff, and I assume the people up there must have been shaken, something, I don't know. Maybe they liked it. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I guess they didn't really approach, I mean, you were young, all of you at that time, but I guess they didn't approach the town as a whole and say, this is what we plan to do, and we will be fair to your people, and people in Guilford could advocate for the people whose lives would be changed. It just seemed like there was no sort of municipal involvement. Is that true?
I would
I
say.
believe so.
true.
I
would
believe
say
so
yeah.
because I looked through some of the old town reports, and there's no mention of the interstate system going through it all. And the old town reports just list of activity, local activities in Guilford.
Well, it was the federal government, and
Right.
I mean, when the letter, it was pretty, I read it, I was gonna grab it, but we wouldn't have had time. But it was pretty straightforward. It looked to me like, this is what we're doing. We're coming in, we're gonna put 91 in, we're gonna give you $700 for, what'd you say, 40 something acres?
40 acres.
And, I wish that I would have, I don't think that even if somebody would have balked at it, I don't think that it would have done any good with the federal government's control.
Right.
I doubt it, but I know it had to go somewhere, but Vernon would have been nice.
Right.
Sorry if you're from Vernon.
I remember different people tried to negotiate price, to be more fair, but it was, if we paid this person 3 cents an acre or something, then we can't pay you 5 cents an acre. And so it has to be pretty even. Didn't ever hear of anybody that got a much better deal than the neighbor did.
Mm-hmm. And how did you have an impression? Well, I guess I have two questions at once. As little kids, did you think it was exciting to see, I know how the little kids in my neighborhood, whenever a big vehicle comes, it's a source of great excitement. And I didn't know whether, when you were kids, whether all of this heavy equipment and, giant earth-moving change was sort of exciting or fascinating to you?
Remember?
Not especially, I guess.
No, not really. It was almost, I remember it was almost like a slight fear that, what is this changing our lives? How much is it going to change? And it was like, there's nothing we can do. It's going to come through, and that's it. And you saw neighbors that disappeared because their house disappeared. And they went, and you said, boy, I'm glad I wasn't them.
Mhm.
That's the only thing that you would think about. But no,
Mhm.
but you didn't have any great choices, I don't think.
Mhm. No.
I know that at the gas station down the road, when he sold the diesel, my dad, I mean, we lost our dad, basically. I was probably 7 or 8, and he had to move. He had 8 children. So, I mean, once the highway, I mean, there was so much traffic in the tractor trailer trucks. He had a booming business going there. And then I mean, I was young, but I remember thinking, well, now he's going to work somewhere different. He had to leave every day because he ran that 24 hours a day. And he was, it was
Uh-huh. Jackie, are you saying your dad had a gas station there?
yeah, he had a big
he
service.
lived right there.
Yeah, we lived at the gas station, like a half a mile down. And he changed tractor trailer trucks tires in the middle of the night. And I remember them
Wow.
banging, and he would just, if he heard a truck pull in, he'd get up and go take care of whatever it needed. They had a service station, small service station kind of thing.
And
Yeah,
what
a
was
lot
the
of tractor
location,
trailers.
Jackie?
Right on Route 5, just over the line on the left. His name was
Just over the Massachusetts line.
I lived on the
Yeah.
Massachusetts side, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it was sad for us. I mean, I remember.
I bet.
Oh yeah, my mom. So here's my mother taking all 8 of us, and not that she handled it well, but yeah, she was left as a single parent kind of because he was working so much at his other
And
place.
so he was working so much at the gas station, or he had to leave to work elsewhere?
He went down to Greenfield. He only went to Greenfield, but he wasn't there for
Right, I get it.
7 to 7 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it was different.
Well,
and
go ahead,
as
Hal.
just a comment there, when the interstate come up through, it was in Guilford down by the Gaineses there. Then as it got up a little bit further, it was in Vernon. And then it come back into Guilford when it got up by just below Jim Henry's.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of that, Harry. That's a good point.
So I don't know what percentage of it
Yeah,
is in Vernon, but
Right.
there's
Yeah.
a good portion of it.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there are all kinds of people having comments here. Julie Beats says, I grew up in Greenfield, and my father told many stories of the house that he grew up in Greenfield that was destroyed by the highway. They had no choice. It was eminent domain. And, I just wonder, aside from the people who were along Route 5, were there people who were happy about the highway coming through?
Well, I don't know. I don't think they probably had a choice. It was
Oh, I
just
know,
gonna
but were there people who you think were just sort of excited that, was there a sort of public opinion campaign to try to say this is going to be wonderful and Vermont is going to be opened up and everybody will be so excited? Because it just seems like
We didn't know what a 4-lane highway was.
Right.
So it was a strange thing they were going to put through because we were used to just 2-lane highways.
Yeah. It's
They
Quite.
didn't sell us, nobody sold us on, this is going to be great. This is wonderful. It's just, there's surveyors out here and they might go through your back field and put up stakes like they did at our place, because one of the plans was to have the curve come through our land and then turn to go into Brattleboro. But thank God they switched it further over into Vernon. So we didn't.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
But they
it was a
didn't tell
fear.
you anything about how they were making these decisions. It was just they put a stake up and then they changed their minds?
Yes, yes. No, I remember for 3 or 4 months we had stakes across our field that we had to mow around, because then they said, no, we decided it'd be better to change it back to another place and you can take your stakes down.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody lost their house. Didn't you think wasn't there, they moved a house or something up the road?
There were,
Mike Kachuk, was it?
where Kachucks used to live.
Do you know
Wasn't
anything?
that house moved up there where
He-
Hiley lives now? Wasn't that
Uh-huh.
from down by Franklin Road?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a house right between Route 5 and the Franklin Road there that they
Yeah.
moved.
Yeah, that's
I don't
the one.
know just where they moved it to, but that might be down where Hiley's are now.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what he
Right.
said. It
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
So they moved a house. I mean, that must have affected them, I would assume.
I don't know where they did go to.
Yeah.
So who actually moved the house? Was this sort of we're taking your land, but we'll use our equipment to move your house? Or was the landowner just responsible for getting their house out of there?
I don't know who moved it.
That's a good question, Brandon.
You have to
Yeah,
ask
I don't know.
Mike Kachuk might be able to tell you.
Oh, that's true.
Because they lived in the house after they moved it.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
And then they moved up onto the farm after
Right.
they went
And
up
then
there.
Hiley,
Yeah, when Ken Hiley and Cal were.
Right. Mhm. Yeah.
I think because it was the Brizettes that had the house over here on Franklin Road and Route 5. And they, I think I remember that they were offered so much for the house and they would just demolish it. Or they could have it moved and they would pay so much for that.
Mm-hmm. Right. One of the people, Carolyn Reno, wants to know what kind of prior notice did people receive about, in other words, how long did Guilford know that the highway was happening? I mean, was there a lot of advanced warning that that this change was on its way?
No, I don't think it was. It was just, they started, they knew that they were going to come through this way, but we didn't know what it was. And the list I have from my parents was that it was in 1956 that they came through and listed all the property owners from the Massachusetts line through to Brattleboro, and how much land they were going to be taking. But that was the first notification that this road was coming through.
Mm-hmm.
That was 56 was when the letter came to his grandparents. It was October of 56, so I don't know when they actually started. If that would help, but it was just saying, this is what we're going to do. And I don't know what time went by. You did, to the construction time? Do you remember, Jim, when they started?
It was, well, this letter that my parents still kept was September 25th, 1956. And that's when they were holding a meeting at the basement of the community church here in Algiers. And you had a certain time to go and talk to them, negotiate how much they were going to take or something like this. And then each person, the meetings began at 9 in the morning, and you could talk to the people from the state highway department.
Mhm. Here's another question. Were most of the road construction workers local, or were they hired from somewhere else? I mean, to your knowledge. I know you were young, but was there any sense of this?
Yeah, there was a construction out of Maine named Hemmon Construction from Maine. And actually, one of the foremen put a trailer up the road here on our land while he stayed here while they were working over there. For I don't know, remember how long it was here, but it was.
I think it was before, by the time that they came to the landowners in 56, the road actually, the construction began immediately after negotiations. And then, but it was completed to Brattleboro in 61, I believe. So it went pretty fast from 56 to 61.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of people that did work on the project because putting up the fencing that runs on both sides of 91 that had to keep the animals out, everything. So a lot of the local people did actually end up working for him. And
Mhm. Here's another interesting comment from Louise Hodson. She says, my stepfather, Craig Hawkins, lived in Dummerston, and when they went by his house, it was along the river near Sweet Tree Farm. They dumped a lot of rock, but it never stopped settling to bedrock. The local farmers suggested using hay underneath the rock, so they bought all of his hay and then dumped the rock, and it worked. To this day, the interstate still sits on hay. So, wow, what do you think?
that must be the bump.
They didn't try to buy anybody's hay to settle the interstate?
That's a good idea.
No, and not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to be a great stabilizer, I would think, over years, but.
Yeah, but that was the
That
federal
engineering
government.
school.
Let's see, here's another comment from Spoon to everyone. Brattleboro lost 25 to 30 houses and one entire street, Northern Avenue, and a few houses where it crossed 5 on the south end of town. So that was just the impact, I guess, on Brattleboro.
Well, there was actually there was a carnival place, Latches, had a small ski resort that where 91 now goes through was just so it went through their little ski resort, a very small one, but changed everything. That's why we used to have the circuses and a fairground road.
Oh, right.
That was where all the circus were, and now that's where 91 goes through.
Did you say circuses?
Yeah, fair. They
That's right. So there was a fair on Fairground Road.
Yes.
Oh, I always wondered why it was called Fairground Road.
That's where it got its name, Veranda.
Well, duh, you
There
know.
you go. Well, then we learned something new.
Well, thanks, Jackie. You know, it was So do you remember going to fairs on Fairground Road?
Yes, I
actually
do.
I went to something up there that they had big tents, but I was a kid and I didn't have any clue where I was. But it was fun.
Yeah.
I don't, it might have been a different thing. I don't know. Might have been the Guilford Fair.
No, it was bigger than the Guilford Fair.
It was bigger. It was bigger. I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, we know that the Guilford Fair first started on Harry Evans's land. Right, Harry?
Yes, it started as kind of an old home day. That's how it started, and it was there several years before it's down at where it is now. I wasn't very old when it started. I can just barely remember when it started. I think I would have been 4 or 5 years old when it started.
Let's see. Here's another comment. Let's see. Dwight Fitch says Guilford Central School opened in 1957. There were quite a lot of children were children of construction workers. So that's really interesting that the early years of the Guilford School had the children of construction workers. So they must have brought their families to live in the community. Did Dwight, are you there? Did you go to Guilford School then with the kids of construction workers?
Yeah, I was in 7th grade when the Central School was opened up in 1957. There were a number of children that, that were living in town that their father was working on the roads. And they, soon afterwards, these construction workers would move right up the highway, I think, as it was being built. As far as the where Jim was referring to the ski area, Latches had a ski tow that was taken, and the ski jump, they had a ski jump too. And in that field where the shopping plaza, that's where they held carnivals. The fairground roads where the fairs were held long before I was born, because I know my father would talk about going to Brattleboro. That was held on where the high school is built now. But that's where the fairgrounds were for Brattleboro. But there were carnivals that were held in the Latches, in Latches, what I'd call Latches Field. That's right opposite.
Oh, right. I know where that is.
And that was in the 50s before the highway went through. I don't think they were too much afterwards, because I'm not sure when they built that plaza. I remember First National was one of the first places that, moved up into that plaza when it was first built.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Dwight. Here's a question from Matt to everyone. Besides corn and hay, what crops were grown? An old-timer in Bernardston, now deceased, told me they grew flax where the highway went. Anybody have any recollection of flax growing?
No, I don't have any. It must have been before my day, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So what crops did you grow on your farm, Bob? Well, you had a dairy farm, so you had to grow.
Yeah, just hay mostly over there, because it was kind of ledgy where they went through anyway, so it wasn't really that bad. But of course, then lumber, of course.
Uh-huh. Did they try to choose land that wasn't the best farmland to sort of save the good land for the farmers?
Well, actually, where they went through was a good spot, because they say it was ledge, and so we kept most of our good fields. So
Actually, they followed Route 5 pretty closely all the way up through. because as it still does. They didn't, they took the most direct route to connect further on, wherever it went through. They didn't choose because this was a better farmland or something. They took something else. As Jane Crosman I saw is waiting, and her farm was one of the ones really devastated. Split right in half.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Here are some more questions from Sarah Emons. What year was the interstate completed into Massachusetts and traffic to and from Vermont stopped using the cutoff at the Mass line?
That was one of the first parts they opened up, from the state line up to Algiers. They got off right by the Welcome Center up there, right by
Ripples.
Whipples, yeah, near Whipples. So
Mhm.
actually, Berniston, I don't know if they had the Brattleboro one done before they did Berniston.
Yeah,
I think
Mass line to exit 1 was completed November 1st, 1958.
Wow.
it wasn't, we weren't on it in 58. I'm
It's,
quite sure.
I just looked it up.
Oh, so this is not based on your recollection. You
I'm
looked
a lot
it up.
younger than that. A lot younger than those fellows.
Well, if they bought the land in 56 and they had completed it 4-lane all the way to Brattleboro by 58, I don't.
November 1st, 58 is what it
I can,
says.
I can remember them opening that up right around November of 58, because, you know, from Algiers down to the state line, I'm not sure when they opened the, you know, from the state line down through Berniston. It must have been a couple of years later. And it was a few years later when they got it up through Brattleboro. I was in high school. I know I did my driver's training in 61, and we could get on the road in at exit 1 and drive down to Route 5 south of Berniston, just on the Greenfield line. I know I wasn't old enough to drive in Massachusetts, so I had to drive just in Vermont. And then one of the other students drove the rest of the way. But my training on the highway was just in Vermont.
Mhm.
Of course, the interstate was actually built starting at the border of each state, and they were all beginning at the same time. But where Vermont started at the Berniston line, it didn't necessarily mean that it continued into Massachusetts. You would get off in
Yeah.
Berniston at the line and go back on 5.
That's correct. You're right, Jim. I was born in 56, and I remember when I was a little kid, my dad was still there, because I do remember the trucks. And like 91, the cutoff that Sarah Emmons was asking about is halfway between here and where I lived, right just before East Mountain Road, you know, down on the south end. So my dad's station was still running, so they must not have, I think they did have to get off. They must have, because otherwise he wouldn't have had.
They were not continuous.
Right, well, not then, for a while. So I don't know, maybe that
I think
that
that
might be confusing. It is confusing.
it is confusing because
Cutoff,
then
yeah.
you would get back on Route 5 and then maybe in the other side of Greenfield or something, you would get another stretch that you'd get back on a 4-lane highway. And it went like that for quite a long time.
Yeah, that sounds right. I'm sure that's right, yeah.
Mhm. Well, I can recollect when I first moved here in 1968, I think it was Springfield, Mass, you know, to come up the interstate. I think that that Route 91 in Springfield, Mass wasn't completed and that we had to get off and go on Route 5 for a while and then get back on to, and I can't remember where exactly it resumed,
Well,
but
been
yeah.
right at the border. It'd been right at the border because there was an entry onto the 91 right at the border, which is, you can still see where the on-ramp was.
That's right, yeah, right down below us, you mean, Jim?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and they built that way up. I mean, that thing, they split the field there pretty good too, actually, that,
We didn't own the field then, though.
right, yeah, somebody else owned it. Now
We
they,
ended up buying that from the state. Cut off and all of it.
But the first one you'd get on at the border, and then you would get off on Whipples down here, and come back onto Route 5, and then you would go on into Brattleboro, because it took them a long time to build that bridge going over Broad Brook and into Brattleboro. So, and I remember when in the wintertime when the skiers would come back, that they would be directed down this 2-lane road to the 91. But then if it was a heavy snowstorm, they would all end up in the middle of 91 in the median because they didn't know that there was the 2 roads. You know, it was, a lot of people pulled out of the snowbank.
Let's see, here's another comment, once again from Spoon. Many small businesses on Route 5 disappeared, but shrewd land speculators were buying up land near all the planned exits. Spoon, would you like to say a little more about how you know this? Or just, expound a little more about it, because I'm sure people would be interested. Can you unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, this works. Well, I'm just have always had a very great interest in the history of the town, and have, I count Bob George, sort of the town historian photographer among my friends, and so I, spent a lot of time in the historical society room and read old newspapers. It's very interesting to see what actually happened when you read the news stories in the newspapers. And
So, but how? Where did the land speculators bought land around the exits?
yeah.
And what did they build there?
Well, an example, which I think you all know, is Exit 3. From the West River all the way to what is now the roundabout was all farmland.
Right.
Except for a few kind of roadside touristy businesses. And within a few years after the highway opened in 61, it was already known as the Strip, with neon signs and shopping centers and that whole stretch. And even now, to this day, there was an airport up there, and that was taken up. And it just it became industrial and commercial all the way through.
Well, it's lucky that didn't happen along our strip of the Coolidge Highway in Guilford. Here's a question from Melissa Hall. When did they remove the connection at the bottom of the Gaines land at East Mountain?
well, did you say when did they remove it? They have not
Remove
removed.
the connection at the bottom of the Gaines land by East Mountain. Is that what you meant, Melissa? Well, I guess
I believe they closed it when Massachusetts built up to it.
Yeah, it's
ramp's
still
still
there.
there.
The ramp is still there. Yeah.
The
It's-
ramp's still there.
They
Took the culverts out. I used to drive a tractor through the culverts. They were that big.
You used to drive a tractor through the culvert, you mean just for fun?
Yeah, you could drive a tractor right through these culverts. They were so big.
That's probably why they took them out.
No, they took them out. They're
Well-
still over here. They dumped them over here on our property.
There are culverts on our property. That's another thing I will say. They put tons of wire. So that's true. There's like a whole conglomeration
They
of
didn't do that.
culverts. Who did that? Culverts,
Another
another, a different construction company?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
replaced the wire, the fence, and
When they took the wire down, they left it though. But
yeah,
it's still there.
yeah.
I don't-
They brought in rock from the ledges and they dynamited the ledges and widened the road, not the road, but the
Medians.
yeah, and everything.
Hmm.
And they dumped all the rock over here, and where they took out the gravel, filled it all back in with rock, and then there was some old wire from they replaced the wire and dumped the wire in there
So yeah, they just came in and dumped it on the
and
land or
buried
whatever.
it in the
Yeah,
ground.
we've dug some of that up before.
They buried it because they just needed a place to dump it?
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right. Okay, do we have any other questions from people? Here's one. How did Guilford change after the highway came through?
Well, well, in Algiers there was, before the the interstate comes through, there was a garage, the two places where you could get gas. And there used to be two stores. There was a store down by the Broadbrook Bridge there on Route 5 there, Mill Road. And let's see, there was used to be a barber shop up by where the store is there now, at the lower edge of that parking lot. There was some buildings there and the barber shop. There was quite a lot of activity there. The garage that's there now, there used to be a garage, a wooden garage and a house, as I remember,
Right.
almost attached to it. And when you was coming from Brattleboro and coming up our road, you could swing right by the gas pumps there. There wasn't much room between the garage and the road. If you was gonna put your car in the garage that worked on or something, you pretty much had to back right out into the road, as I remember. And the road didn't go down to a T section the way it is now. It was pretty close to the old garage. And let's see, Warren Lazelle, the mailman, I can remember when, way back when I was young, whenever we got a deer, during deer hunting, he took in deer hides down there. And in exchange for the deer hide, maybe a little bit of money with it, you could get a pair of buckskin gloves there. And that was quite a treat. And I remember he did that for quite a few years. Let's see, I don't know. Well, they used to be able to go to Brattleboro, but there's now the Patches Road there that the interstate cut that road off because you could go up over and go down into South Main Street there. I don't know. There's can't think right at the moment of the changes.
Was there a tractor dealer, Harry?
Oh, yeah. So Yeah, you're right. There was I can remember opposite the store, the mill building down there, there was a Cleatrack dealership there. I can't remember his name there, but we used to have a small Cleatrack on the farm. I think they might have got it down there. It was kind of a secondhand thing, and it worked good if you could keep the tracks on it. If you steered wrong in the wrong place, a track would come off, and you'd spend a couple of hours getting track back on again. And he serviced those machines down there. And then after that, let's see, I think it was the Ford tractor
Eats.
come along. The Keats, that's right, Keats.
John
Oh,
started-
right. I remember that.
started his dealership there.
Mhm.
And then I don't know, after that, I guess the building kind of come down after a certain point.
Mhm. Was there a big change in population density of Guilford following the completion of Route 91? I mean, did more people move to Guilford following the completion of the highway?
I don't think the population changed that much. I think the population of Guilford, going back in history, the population of Guilford changed the most when the railroad come into Brattleboro. At one time, if I'm correct, I've heard that there used to be more people in Brattleboro and Guilford than it did in Brattleboro. I could be wrong there, but I've heard
No,
that.
I think Guilford was the big deal and Brattleboro was a backwater according to the Guilford history. And I mean, I heard an interesting story that that really surprised me. I think it was maybe my neighbor Zeke Hecker or Don McLean mentioned that the reason why all the people that I know moved to Guilford was really because of Route 91, because there was a teacher at a private school in New Jersey, who decided that he wanted to move to the country, have a vacation place. And he drew a circle around Route 91 on the map and decided that he wanted to live in the outer part of that circle, close enough to Route 91 so that he could go back to the city, I guess, but far enough away so that he could be in the sticks. And so one part of his circumference was on the Packer Corners Road. And somebody showed him a little very retired cottage on the Packer Corners Road right next to what had been Forrest Franklin's farm. And he fell in love with that little cottage and he bought it. And he invited some of his former students to buy small places there. And so that's how Don McLean and Zeke Hecker and Harry Saxman all moved to Guilford. And I went to college with Don McLean. And so in 1968, we heard that Forrest Franklin had died, the farmer who was next door to Graham Down, this teacher. And so when we were looking to relocate, being completely ignorant about what we were doing, I might add, we came and looked at Forrest Franklin and Rosie's farm. Forrest had died. And Rosie, not long after that, moved to an all-electric apartment in Greenfield. And so we came to the farm and the house was locked. We looked in the window and thought, oh, well, but at the top of the hill, there was a peach orchard that was entirely in bloom. And so we walked up the hill and saw this pinkish haze and turned around, and it was the most beautiful place on earth that I had ever seen. And I decided that I was going to live there forever. And so we put a down payment on the farm. Rosie held our mortgage. We paid $227 a month for 10 years. And people told me that the hippies got taken. You know, now you could just keep on adding zeros to that. But I had never heard the connection to Route 91. And when I thought about the impact of Route 91 on my life, I didn't realize it until this week. And here we are talking about the impact of Route 91 on your lives. So I'm very grateful for your sacrifice, all of you who lived, whose lives were uprooted and changed around so much by Route 91. It's really amazing. Oh, and Don McLean. Don, why don't you just speak instead of me reading your what you wrote? Don, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, Veranda's got the story pretty much the way I remember it, which is that Zeke Hecker and I and Harry Saxman, who also ended up here in Guilford, and a bunch of other people were at a prep school in New Jersey. And one of the teachers there in 1964 decided he wanted a vacation place somewhere within a number of hours driving distance. And so he drew a circle on the map, and he noticed that that going up into New England might be a nice idea. So he ended up on Interstate-91, and he kept going north. And at one point, the road stopped, and it was exit 1 in Brattleboro. That was the end of his travels. So because the road ended there, he got off the highway and drove into downtown Brattleboro and saw a sign for a real estate agent and went in and said, I want to buy a piece of property for $7,500. It's got to have everything included, sheets for the beds and so forth. He was a bachelor. And so he didn't want to have to do any actual housework to make it a place. And the real estate person had this little camp on Packer Corners Road, which is where he ended up.
Who is this?
So that's why we're here.
Well, that's great. So going back to Jim Henry, a little birdie told me that you have a story about taking the family Pontiac onto the highway before this was open. Is this true?
Well, I didn't. They had a point in which they'd completed 91 from the Massachusetts border to the Whipples, and it was still closed off. Nobody else could be on there. But my mother took my sister and I, and we had a 57 Pontiac with the big V8 in it. And my mother said, well, this is about the best time to see how fast this car will go, because nobody else was on it. And so we went around the barriers down near the Massachusetts border, around the barriers, because it was still closed off. And we went all the way up to almost to Whipples, being the only car on it. But my mother did hit over 100 miles an hour. So.
Mercy, really?
Yeah.
That's a good.
Wow, what an astonishing. So was Greg, what did you say, Jackie?
I said that's a great memory. That's
Yeah.
great.
Was sort of bad behavior on Route 91 before it was open, was that like a big thrill? Could you do that?
it was because nobody was supposed to be on it. And it was just like 2 days before the grand opening, you know, and so everything was perfect. But no, I figured that my mother thought, well, we may as well get the first run down through it. And of
Wow,
course,
that's
remember, there was no crash bags, there was no seatbelts, there was no nothing. It was the three of us on the front seat of the Pontiac doing 100 miles an hour down 95. I do remember that very well.
I bet you do.
that's just speeding into the future,
Yes,
you know,
yes. Well,
with the Guilford Historical Society, you know, it's just really, I mean, this has been such a lovely conversation. And I just wonder whether you have any last thoughts. We've got about, let's see, 15 more minutes, right, Chuck, of band time here. And so I'm just wondering whether anybody here in the audience has a Route 91 story that you wanted to share. This is the audience participation time.
Okay, you're on. Say it.
Okay, I'm Richard Hamilton, and at the time that the interstate came into Brattleboro, I was operating the Skyline restaurant at Hogback, a little farther up than where Hugh Whitney had his stand. And as I remember, Patriots Day made a little flurry for us at Hogback, and we always looked forward to it because people had the day off and they could take a tour and come up through Brattleboro and over the Mollystock Trail and and of course right by Skyline. And that's how when the interstate came by, we experienced a busier day. And we didn't put it together beforehand. It was after that we realized what 91 was doing, and so many people on Patriots Day, whether it was that year or the next year, took a ride and they'd go up over and into North Adams and back on the Mohawk Trail into Greenfield again. And we just remember that about 91, and it sure made us realize what the future might bring.
Wasn't that also when Mount Snow opened up and everybody had to go over Route 9?
Yes.
To get to Dover? And that was because that Mount Snow opened in the 1950s.
Yes.
And that put a lot of traffic on Route 9.
Yes, it did. It still has its effect.
Yes.
That was such a treat to go to the Skyline restaurant. I mean, we didn't get to do it very often, but it was just a wonderful spot to go and look out. So thanks for doing that.
I remember actually from Guilford's snowmobile trail system. Anyone from Guilford? We went up and had breakfast at the Skyline on the snowmobiles from here all the way up to your place.
I have heard many stories about that, and yes, the snowmobiles brought in quite a lot of business, and everyone had their helmets on and lined them up on the shelf, and it was snowmobiles made a dent. I mean, a good contribution to.
That's a great restaurant. I miss it.
Yeah, well,
Whatever.
I connected with Bob Gaines in high school, and he was taking the ag class, and so was I, and it was a great time. Bob was a very special guy, and he made a good hockey player too.
He was on that. He was on in the paper for the last championship. He played on the hockey team in Brattleboro
1939.
in 1939. His picture was just in the paper a few days ago.
Yes, I cut those out. Yeah, Bob Gaines was a great hockey, and he was a great ball player too.
So Jackie, what year would that have been that you snowmobiled up to the skyline?
It would have been probably in the earlier 80s, maybe. About 80s.
So there was enough snow.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few ruts in places, but we didn't mind. Okay.
God, that would be so much fun.
It was fun. Yeah. The trail system's still there.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of cross-country skiers that you find along the way too. It's great.
Yeah. Oh. Well, everybody, let's see. It seems like, oh, somebody wants to know, how does one get involved with the Guilford Historical Society? Well, it's not hard. Chuck, would you like to say something about getting involved with the Historical Society? Or maybe Nancy would like to, Harry?
Jim Henry is president right now.
Oh, Jim, of course.
Yeah.
What am I saying? Jim, would you like to talk about getting involved with the Historical Society?
Well, we are open now to anybody that has an interest in history, especially of Guilford history, to come by the museum and work with us on the treasures that we have there. And we're expanding into more and more things, but we have had several people recently move to town and have asked us, when are you open? And of course, we haven't been open this past year because of the pandemic, but we will be opening in the spring very soon, hopefully, to make it. But just stopping by when we're there, we'd be glad to have more and more people involved in it.
Mm-hmm. And so, Jim, is there like a telephone number that people could call to just know when to be open, when it will be open?
On our website, of course, we're on Facebook, and also the Guilford Historical Society. The easiest way to get in touch with us, or writing us at the town hall.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so I guess, I think in terms of COVID, in May, there might be meetings in person once again. I think that the rules are still about remote meetings. We've all seen now what a delightful kind of Zoom you can have. but I'm not sure if the Historical Society is having meetings like this. Are you?
Yes, yes, we are.
Oh, so perhaps do you have meetings on a regular day so that people could just log on?
Not at this point. It was Chuck has introduced us to the Zoom meetings, which we've been able to do for this time. But we will be going back to having our meetings actually at the museum.
Mm-hmm.
But Chuck just put up our information site, information at Guilford Historical Society.
Well, I want to thank all of you, Jackie and Bob and Jim and Harry, for just making this such a, I mean, the time has just flown away. We've been together for an hour and a half, and I learned so much stuff that I didn't know before, and just sharing your perspective is such a gift to the rest of us, and you're all great storytellers. And so just, you know, we can't go on not meeting like this, let's put it that way. So I guess.
I have a question for the audience.
Oh, yeah?
Is it possible that we could poll to find out how, because this is a really big meeting, how did they find out about it, so that we, and even the historical would know how to connect to have a good meeting like this for a lot of groups in town? Or, you know, how did people find out about this Zoom?
I read it in the Brattleboro Reformer.
Okay, so it was in the paper? Okay, I did, yeah, all right.
I saw it on Front Porch Forum.
Okay.
Facebook.
Facebook.
Anybody else see it on the paper?
Yeah, it seems like the people in chat are saying Front Porch Forum, Facebook, all the usual ways.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And we're planning to do more of these in conjunction with Chuck, who Chuck, as everybody probably knows, is the new owner of the Spring Farm, and it's such a important part of Guilford and the history, and he has the ability to bring us. So this was our first example to see if we could pull off something that people would be interested in.
Yeah, and Chuck mentioned about that we were having a chat before this opened about one-room schoolhouses, and Chuck, he was sweet and said that he could maybe facilitate, I don't know the right word, orchestrate or something, another, you know, for something like that, right, Chuck?
Yeah, I think people, we had actually had the Historical Society maybe talk about, again, getting people who had gone to school in the one-room schoolhouses, including some of the people who spoke tonight. And we sort of had an informal chat before the program. So that's a wonderful topic. Maybe we could do another online Zoom discussion of that, and some of the others of you in the community who went to one-room schoolhouses could be part of that. So, and if you have other ideas of just people, Jim has said, you know, we should have Mr. Franklin come on and just sort of talk about the early days of the Franklin Farm. So people have ideas of forums like this. They're really easy to produce.
I could say something. I live in New London, New Hampshire, and I put a link in earlier about somebody named Steve Taylor, and ironically, he does a presentation through New Hampshire Humanities, and used to do it in person, but now through Zoom, and my link is further down the way. He does presentation on roads, New Hampshire roads taken or not, and he covers the I-89 and other roads and the construction and some of the things it did and politics of it and all that stuff. And he also does a presentation on one-room schoolhouses. So, and he's an old timer, and he lived in Meriden, New Hampshire for a while. He's a wonderful presenter, and it's interesting that has some parallel interests. just in case you wanted to kind of confer with him or listen to some of his presentations. He's just a name for you to know about.
Well, thanks so much. That's great to know. I think that probably, pardon me?
He was one of the founders of New Hampshire Humanities, and he has at least one workshop coming up. Or one.
Terrific. Well, thanks for giving us the link. I think we'll probably be turning into pumpkins here shortly after 8:30. So
Just a note on the Historical Society. My mother was one of the founders of the organization, along with Eric and Joan Barradale and many others in town.
Was there somebody who has a question down the bottom?
Yeah, Jean Bergman wanted to speak.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I just wanted to ask if they, Guilford, had a oral history project earlier where they have a lot of information like this. We did with the elementary school an oral history project back in 2004, 2000. And I thought this would be a good idea to do because we've run into recently people like Hugh Whitney, who doesn't want to be in front of the camera, but who would talk. And it would be fun for the two historical societies to find a topic that would, bring us some new. We have a collection of tapes at the Marlborough Historical Society that was done at the Vermont Bicentennial. And then we have this series of interviews that we did in 2004 to 2006. And that would be fun because a lot of the people that have the old history, of course, are not here any longer. And
it's so true when you say discussing one-room schoolhouses, how many are there of us left? That
right. So I said there are probably one or two people here several people in Marlborough, but it would be fun to sort of put them together somehow. And the fact that we have this technology of the Zoom would be a good way to do it if we could sort of organize that.
Yes, well, I had the pleasure of interviewing a whole lot of Guilford elders in about 2007, 2008. And so I've got, 30 different people, 31 people that I spoke to. And, it's an ongoing project. And so we can talk about it some more. I mean, I think everybody listening to everybody is just what we want to do in these times. Just being able to appreciate each other's lives is such a nice alternative from yelling at each other.
Right.
Not that we do that here.
And with 91, I remember, I guess it was in 63 to 65, commuting up from New York on weekends to visit relatives up in Woodstock. And, the first year or two that we did that, it would take 5 hours from New York. And then when 91 opened up, we gained an hour and a half, and you used to go only as far as Springfield and the big new duplex movie house, and then you had to go on to the dirt road of Route 5. It was always an adventure that lasts, especially in the springtime, to hit the mud roads and things like that.
Well, thanks so much, Jean. Well, I think we're going to have to say goodnight all. And, you think of the topics that you want to hear about and also the stories that you have to share from your own lives, and get in touch with the historicals, and we'll see about making it so. So I think we can all bid each other a fond good night and happy spring. And till we meet again.
Good night.
Thank you.
And thank you.
I'll
Thank you.
unmute everybody so we can applaud our speakers here. Hey,
Thank you. Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for bringing it together.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. That was wonderful.
Thanks so much.
That was terrific.
Thank
Bunch of
you.
rock stars.
And Harry, we made it through, which we weren't sure.
Yes, we did. Yes,
Hi,
we
Jean.
did.
So
Thank
how
you,
did that
Jackie.
feel
Thank
for
you, Bob.
Thank
Were
you.
you comfortable? Was it a good experience?
Yes, yes, it was.
Oh, good.
So fun.
Thank you so much. Well, new topic, new conversation. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank you,
Miranda.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you
It was
so
wonderful.
much.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bob's, I'm still unmuted.
Cracking up. I just want to watch everything.
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, thank you, Chuck. Really wonderful.
That was fun, huh?
Great idea.
It was
huh?
a great idea. How
I
many
know, we
people? 80? Did you say 80?
We had 102 people,
Oh,
Wow.
my goodness.
and we had
That's so great.
about
Boy,
85
I would,
stayed on well into the 90th minute or the 80th minute or so. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That is great. For our maiden voyage, that's super.
Yes, we weren't sure anybody would be interested.
I know, I know.
I'm glad Jackie asked that question about how do people find it, because
Yeah, thank you,
Hey.
Jackie. That was
That-
smart.
That was a good question.
a
Yeah.
little information, and it seemed like the mix of Front Porch, Reformer, Facebook,
Right.
just hit everything. Hit
Yeah, exactly.
But that isn't that hard, actually. It's like 4 emails and you publicized the thing. So that was great. And
Jean, I think your idea of collaborating with Marlboro is a great idea.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, come up with some good stuff.
Right. Also, Chuck, at some point you should ask Dan Snow, who the artist, the rock artist, about his adventures, because he, as a teenager, worked on Route 91, and it sort of changed his whole life.
wow.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
wow.
He's a really good speaker, very thoughtful. So if you have a chance, maybe you should invite him to talk with your historical society people.
I know him well.
All
Well,
right.
he's
Yeah,
really
he's been on.
he's a great artist and just really nice and well-spoken person. So it'd be fun to have him talk about the adventures with 91 at a young age.
Where is he from, Jean?
He lives, I think, up in Putney.
Harry probably knows.
I don't really know quite where he lives now, but at one time he spent quite a little time at the farm here, way
Oh, he
back
did?
in his earlier days.
Nice. So you got to know him.
Yes.
Good.
Well, his art is spread all over the world. He spent time over in Scandinavia and in Ireland and stuff, teaching people about dry stone walling.
Interesting.
He has a few books, too.
Yes,
I'm-
he
oh,
has
that
several.
would- yeah, I think people would be really interested in that. Even like if you could, stone workers, imagine what they could learn from somebody like that.
Right.
Really.
He would be a good person.
Yeah. Stone. Go for it.
I mentioned this novel, and I know Pat Frost has read it, but it's called Exit 8 by John Bragg, and it's a sort of novel about the construction of the highway further up toward Windsor, and the
great.
kind
Exit
of
8?
fictionalized story. Exit 8, and it's sort of.
You won't want to
1
put
year-
it down, Jean. You're gonna want to read it straight through. It's so touching. It's
What's
great.
beautiful is that
Yeah, Mom
September-
was the last one to bed for like the whole week. She was reading it. She just couldn't put it down.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
You stay up past the teenagers, you know you're into the book.
Who's the
It's
author?
It's
How
1
you
year.
shut this off?
Who's they're gonna cut us off. Who's the author?
His name is John Bragg.
Okay.
And
Other
it's sort
one.
of starts in September the year before. So the highway's coming in a year, and it's sort of about the whole cycle. And it's a beautiful book just about what life was like before the highway and rural life. And and then, you know, it's sort of based loosely on the real life of Romaine.
You're talking.
Who refused
Oh,
to,
man. No?
who refused to move. I won't give away the whole story, but yeah.
I don't get it.
I think this is great that we had this program, and I think we touched on just a few things that were happening. And probably there's quite a few things that
You
we
take
missed
this,
that
that
we'll
other
think of
woman
later.
in the white hair was Kelly Frost.
Yes.
Give him a wave.
This is Diane Frost. I'm Kelly.
That's Kelly.
Kelly.
How'd you get that white hair?
Oh, I don't know.
She earned every one.
You and I'll have to talk someday, Jackie.
Between her daughters and grandchildren, she definitely earned every one of them.
It's impressive that there were a little over 100 people.
I think that's awesome.
That's really great.
Well,
Yeah.
someone I know that lives down at East Mountain Road, he's about 40, and he said, I